Well, welcome. Here we are, 2 pints of lager and a spreadsheet. 3 great guests today. We're talking about storytelling, and I think that's probably one of the priorities that most founders just forget about. It's well down the list, but the more I'm in business and the more I talk to clients and I hear about storytelling and the power of it, it's got to be up that priority list. So we're joined with 3 amazing storytellers, and I think you tell your story in different ways through different mediums, but that's kind of what you do for a living, and I'm really excited about this. It's going to be good. We're going to make a story. So Alan, when you've got a business that's been around for probably 10 years now?
8 years, 8 and a bit years, yeah, nearly 10 years.
We're rounding up.
Yeah.
When did your story, when did it begin? When did it sort of kick in where it was having an impact?
Well, when we started the company, so I founded the company with my then partner, now husband, and we didn't really set up the business on purpose. It was more to facilitate our love of travel and to have somewhere to invoice things out of when we sort of got things up and running. So storytelling was very much part of the founding sort of years of the business, because that was the only thing we sort of had, if that makes sense. So we'd sold all of our stuff and moved into a van and went traveling around Europe, and we were working doing that. And everyone found that quite interesting as a conversation starter. And that was sort of what we built our story on at the beginning. So our brand now is extremely different to what it was then. But then storytelling worked for us very well, because people resonate with other people's stories, don't they? So that was the main thing that we used to sort of market ourselves, I guess, at the beginning. Yeah.
So that was sort of a choice you made from day one, rather than.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, when we were doing our first website, I can't remember exactly what the words were, but it was something about like, let's tell your story, or everyone has a unique story, or something like that, because we were doing marketing and website design and development, just Henry and I. He's a developer, and he was designing the sites as well at the time. And so we were like, well, it's all about storytelling, isn't it? Marketing. So that was literally what our sort of hook was at the beginning. So yeah, it's kind of weird to come back around and think about that now. But yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
David, I remember the first time I heard you, I think it was LDC. It was in like this really sort of formal setting. I think that I'd met you a couple of weeks before, and you stood up and told your story as well. You're just a natural storyteller.
I think
that's how I feel. Yeah,
I think that comes from my mum. Like she was a market stall trader in Glasgow, and so her job was to speak to people, and she's always been very good at that. My background's always been in sales, and the first time I was confident in admitting that was when I started B7 when I was 37 years old. I used to hate the idea that I was a salesperson. Sales for me was always something that you did if you couldn't do anything else. That was the attitude I had towards sales. And then now I argue that we're all actually salespeople in some way, shape or form. And going back to my mum having a market stall in Glasgow, I was working on that market stall on a Sunday at a very young age, and there were people coming to that market stall who didn't necessarily have much money. She was selling second-hand clothes, shoes, handbags, and so you had a big swathe of immigration from places like Northern Africa, Eastern Europe in the very late 80s, early 90s, and then after the Gulf War in Kuwait, you had a lot of Kuwaitis coming across to places like Glasgow, and so the people that were coming onto that stall didn't have money, and they also had very broken English if they could speak English at all. So I suppose I was dropped into this, cultural storm in Glasgow where everyone wanted the same thing. It was clothes. They all wanted something that they needed, and they would exchange money for those goods. And all that separated you was language, and communication was really important. Hand gestures. You had, cultural norms. Egyptian men trying on blouses for their wives who weren't on the stall because my dad was there. And this was quite striking, And then you had Eastern European families who insisted that you knew their kids' names, and they would come every week. And I was fascinated by culture. And then we moved to Africa in the mid-90s. Followed my dad over there, and he was made redundant. Moved to Tanzania. We spent some time there. So I've always been fascinated by culture and storytelling, because essentially stories are told. It's not always verbally. Sometimes stories are told organically through the actions of people through time. And so it's probably no surprise that I now run a marketing agency, because for me the line between sales and marketing is so blurred. But I think your story changes through time. It's not necessarily written for you. The story that you're telling now, Ellen, isn't likely to be the same one you told 8.5 years ago. It transitions from one place to the next. But your ability to tell a story, I think, is what ultimately allows you to create a brand.
Yeah, that's cool. And Rachel, you met Ellen. Were you on the same accelerator program?
Yeah, I think we met about 5 years ago. 5 or 6 years ago.
And I do remember you telling that story about the camper van.
Yeah,
and I've always remembered it.
Yeah,
it definitely is effective.
And when did you start telling your story, or have you?
Yeah, I mean, I think storytelling for me is probably different from the guys, because I feel like it's almost kind of bound up in who I am as a person. So I wrote my first story when I was 11. It was called Charlotte and the Frog, and it was about my baby sister, who was 6 years younger than me, and this frog that she met and the adventure that she went on with the frog. And I wish I had it still. I keep asking my mum, like, has she got it? And she hadn't illustrated it, and so on and so forth. And I think I used to read a lot as a kid, and I got really, really interested in the idea of writing and of being a writer. So I went on and I did a journalism degree, and my first job out of uni was for the BBC. So I got to kind of like live this amazing life where I got to write every day, like as a living. And I was on it's quite amusing, but I was in what the BBC Worldwide called the family group. So you've got kind of mainstream BBC that are telling the stories and the programming and the audio visual, and then BBC Worldwide, which is who I worked for, is the commercial arm, so that's the magazine arm. And I worked in the family group there, and we were on kind of like the precursor to Heat magazine.
All right.
So I was 23 years old, and I just got to kind of like fly around the world interviewing celebrities for 2 years and just discovering the world, and it was all through storytelling. But I think at the heart of it, whether you're interviewing kind of like Beyonce or you're interviewing, I don't know, your sister for a...
Have you interviewed Beyonce?
I've interviewed Beyonce twice.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. At the heart of it all is people, and I think...
What's that like? Come on, we can't just...
Oh, what's Beyonce like? She's lovely. She is the absolute consummate professional. So what you find with kind of like really... We used to call them, there was a D-list celebs, and then you've got like the A-list. And the D-list will just tell you anything for a headline. The A-list are kind of like the opposite of that. So they'll tell you absolutely nothing because they're media trained within an inch of their life, but they are consummate professionals and incredibly polite. It's quite hard to get a really good story out of them because they just won't tell you anything. What you find with those types of people is actually the really interesting stories are the ones of their makeup artists or their stylists or their hairdressers and the entourage that sits around them. And they live insane lives, It's just completely different. I think once I interviewed her in the back of a cab between kind of things that she was filming, and once interviewed her in the Dorchester Hotel in this amazing sort of suite. But at the heart of it all, they're people. All these people are people. It doesn't matter if you are Beyonce.
Are you still in touch?
No longer, sadly, we lost touch. There's something that drives everybody to do whatever they do. So for her, it's, the idea of performance, and performing was always her thing. And, for other people now, I work much more in kind of like the B2B world. So it's not the Beyoncés of the world necessarily. It's kind of often business owners or engineers or technologists. And, everybody's got something, some purpose that's driving them. And when people say they don't have a story to tell, I just simply don't believe it, because, it's about asking the right questions to get the right stories. So, yeah, that's what I just love about storytelling. But I feel like it's very much like part of me as a person.
Okay, cool. And, when a new business owner comes to you and says, I don't know how to tell a story, like what what advice do you give? Do they start taking notes, or kind of how, what advice do you give?
Yeah, for me, again, it comes down to like the questions. So like it's really about like probing, because actually when you first meet somebody, not everybody's going to be kind of that open. So it's about, what you said there about making somebody feel comfortable and trying to find that common ground where you can get them to sort of open up, and actually they don't always spot the things that they think are interesting in their story. But then if you ask the right questions, you can kind of tease that out of them. And it's about what they're comfortable sharing and not sharing. Some people the Beyoncés of this world are quite private, actually. So how much can you push them to share their story? But I think openness, people really engage with that. That's kind of how we're set up as human beings. It's our psyche to engage with the story and an emotion and a human emotion. So I think if you can be as open and authentic as you can, then do that, because everybody's got value and everybody's got purpose and is interesting in their own way.
Yeah, that's cool. And David, you've obviously your marketing agency specialises in capturing image, I suppose, and telling stories that way. How do you make people feel relaxed when suddenly they've got a video camera in front of them?
I mean, you guys know how difficult that can be when you've got a camera pointing at you. It's very difficult, but it's really important. Certainly for me, I think marketing takes many forms. Ultimately, we know that as well as anyone. But video for me is really interesting as a medium of exchange almost, because as business owners you have ideas to share, and even listening to some of the previous guests on your podcast, it's quite clear that they're really hungry to get a message across about their specialism. So whether that's something as really granular as like B Corp or you're talking about something like tax, then it doesn't really matter, but you can see that they're really hungry to share little snippets of information. And what's interesting about video is that it makes it accessible to the layman like me, people who don't necessarily understand those disciplines as well as they do, but I can consume that in my own time. I love the written word. I like to read, and I do read. But we live in very much an attention economy now, and I think that one of the best ways to grab attention is, to allow someone to look into the whites of your eyes in a way that they can only necessarily do when they're watching things like TV shows or movies. It's hard for us to make eye contact with each other for too long, and if we try, it gets pretty awkward, particularly when there's a camera. It's just you're but if you're watching me on camera, you don't feel the need to blink away or move away. So you can really get a sense for who I am and what I believe, the tone of voice, in a way that it's really difficult to get across in any other medium, in my experience. And you're able to do that in a way that's consumable for the layman, so they can save a video for watching later. They can go back to it, they can share it, they can replay it. So it's really important to me that people consider video. It should be a part of their marketing mix when they're thinking about how they get a message across to a customer, to a potential future member of staff, to an existing staff base, to potential investors, that they look at what's really important to them, and that they communicate that confidently. And often, if you can get over staring into these cameras, it's probably one of the most effective ways to communicate today, I think, in a way that you can get a message out at speed.
Yeah, and in an authentic way as well, isn't it? It's it's yourself, and often the written word it doesn't always get that across, or does it, Rachel?
Well, I think it's, for me, in any medium, kind of, it's as much about what's kind of, unless you're live, like what's said and what's unsaid as well. When you write in your piece, there'll be a lot of what's said, you'll introduce me is left behind. And equally, unless you're live, I guess it's the same in terms of sort of video to a degree. But the way that I look at it is it's about taking a holistic approach. I don't think there's one size fits all. So I think, there's been a huge advent of video, no doubt, and I agree with everything that you just said there, 100%. But then I don't watch a lot of video, lots and lots. I'm more of a reader, and other people might be kind of more visual learners in terms of sort of design. So I think it's about actually kind of, it's not just one thing, it's lots of things, I think, isn't it, in terms of how you get your story across.
Yeah, I think it's quite scary though, isn't it? Sort of reflecting, thinking about it. Are people actually going to get this? Do they even want to hear it? That kind of thing, isn't it? And Ellen, do Do you make that more of a strategy in terms of marketing, or is it a sporadic thing, you know?
I mean, I think you've always got to start with a strategy. I mean, what these guys are just talking about in terms of the mediums that you might use to communicate your story or tell your story, that all comes down to what you're trying to say and who you're trying to say it to, doesn't it? So you do definitely need to look at it more strategically. So like when we work with clients, we'll sit down and we'll go like, right, what do you want to say? Who do you want to say it to? And then it sort of all falls into place from there. So yeah, definitely starting with a strategy first is the best thing. And, you know, it's all very well saying it would be amazing for you as a founder to go on video and tell your story. But if you literally can't get over being in front of a camera, that might not work necessarily very well for you. So it might be, you know, shorter snippets, or, you know, social media, or you might start a blog or whatever that might be. But yeah, so it definitely has to be tailored to the company or, you know, the individual, the founder, whoever it is that you're working with. Yeah.
Is there any kind of specific client moments you can think of where you've worked with someone and something's kind of come out as a real kind of storytelling moment that's sparked something? Or
I have a great one. Can I share it?
Yeah, please do.
So we have a client who is in recruitment, and they only recruit for the American roofing industry. So I mean, it's like super niche. So you've got this lad who has built a business, a recruitment business, and they're only recruiting in the US, and they're only recruiting for people who sound like they're from the US. This lad is as Glaswegian as they come. So you can imagine how difficult it is for him to try and tone down his voice and ensure that he can be understood by his target market. He's taken that world by storm. He has transformed not just his business, but he's transforming the industry. And what's really, really important here is that the way that he hooked them was by leaning very subtly on family ties to the industry. So he understood quite quickly that the construction industry is archaic. It's the industries you guys know I come from. I spent most of my time in construction, and it's slow to change. And the people who are within the construction markets, particularly the micro niches of roofing, for example, they generally follow a family member into that industry. So when they hear of someone else who's had a family tie, normally it's a very, very male-dominated industry. So normally you're following your dad or your grandfather or an uncle or something like that. So Luke played on the fact that his dad came from the roofing industry. And all the stories in the world wouldn't have closed the chasm between the fact that Luke's business was in Glasgow and his target market was, you know, thousands of miles away in the US. The simple act of telling a story about his dad's career and how it impacted his family. He would tell stories like, you know, holidays to the Lake District turned into holidays from Florida. So he was anchoring every story that he told in terms of how the roofing industry could advance his family's happiness and well-being and all the rest of it. He would always go back to his dad, and he continues to do that to this day. And it's a tactic, and it's not necessarily see-through unless you know it's a tactic, but it's allowed him to gain entry into an entire new industry and take it by storm just through storytelling. And we encourage that. It's not, you know, stories shouldn't be complex and, you know, overly wordy. It should be like, just speak as though you're talking to someone that you spend Christmas Day with. Like, make it natural. Like, if it's forced, you're going to see through it. So when you speak about your family, you tend to like I did there about my mum's market stall, my dad going to Africa. I'm comfortable telling you those stories, and it probably sounds like a much more effective communicator because I'm talking to you about something that I know intrinsically, that I believe in. You know, and not everyone's good at that. I'm not. So I just talk about what I know. And that's what we encourage our clients to do. Just talk about what you know. And even if it's not necessarily about your business, people will start to get a feel for who you are and what you are all about. And they'll either like you and want to work with you, or they won't. And then you've saved yourself some time. Yeah,
that's cool. And Alan, do you encourage your team to, you know, tell stories? Is that part of your culture, or?
Yeah, I think we're... I don't know, maybe most marketing agencies are like this naturally because what we do is quite creative, but we obviously work with all different types of clients. And yeah, I definitely like encourage my team to sort of have small talk with clients and, you know, get to know the clients and on a personal level as well as a client level. So yeah, 100%. I think some of the team are more natural at opening up and sharing stories with the clients, but I think once you get to know clients better, you're sort of more natural at doing that anyway, aren't you? So, and what we at Vida always say, like our sort of internal value thing with the team is like, we do great work for great people, and it's all about the people we work with and the relationships we have with them. That's literally what our business is built on. So yeah, 100% storytelling and communication, everything in that way is like really, really important to us and our culture as a team as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just runs right through the business.
Yeah.
Kind of natural.
Definitely. I mean, some people, you know, it can be tempting to just start a meeting and just crack on with the business, but at the same time you're just like, well, and sometimes that has to happen, obviously, because there's a lot to do, but sometimes it is nice just to, you know, have a little bit of crack on and, you know, get to know people on a more personal level than just not really thinking about that side.
Yeah, I think it brings your working week to life.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? What have you been up to? Who have you spoke to? What impact have you had? What have you learned?
As marketers as well, a lot of, you know, you'll be talking to a client. We manage some clients' personal LinkedIn, as you guys know, and half the stuff we get them to post on LinkedIn, that comes out of conversations like that. They're like, oh, I was doing this with the family at the weekend, or oh, I just happened to be talking to a client about this the other day, and you're like, oh, well, that would actually make a really good message for your marketing. So it is a really good way for us as well to get those things that people might not think are that interesting for other people to know out and into their marketing as well.
That's cool. Rachel, I mean, in PR, I guess, and with business owners, how do you get them into the mindset of thinking that's probably quite interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with what Ellen said there, actually. I think it is about getting to know them on a different kind of level as well than just kind of purely work and professional, because actually I think what that also does is give you perspective on what their goals and their ambitions and their motivations might be. So when they're making certain moves within their business, and you might be thinking, why are you doing that? You kind of got a different context on why that they do the things they do, or how they act the way they kind of act, and what their motivations are. But I think it is just kind of, it's teasing it out of them again. I think it just comes, for me, it comes back to those questions. What are the right questions you're asking? And sometimes, you know, people will be reticent to maybe sort of share their stories, but we try and, if that's the case, we try and give examples of where we've seen it work before as well, because I think if you've got context and you can see maybe it's somebody you admire in business or has grown a business that, you know, you aspire to kind of be like them, by sharing examples, that gives them context for how that works as well. So it's a lot about show, don't always tell, but ask the right questions, and, you know, make sure that there's comfort there as well, that they're comfortable with that, because it will have the opposite effect if they're not comfortable with it. We have one client, and you know, we've been saying to him for a long time, oh, you could really use doing some more video, and he just can't do it. He's just not comfortable with it. We've tried it several times, it doesn't work. So we're kind of like, okay, right, well, that's just not a medium that's going to work for you, but maybe there's somebody else in your team who it might work for. So I think it's gauging people's comfort as well, and what they're prepared to talk about. Yeah.
So it might be a slightly controversial one, but I guess we've heard a few different mediums of communication. So what would you recommend early stage founders pick if they could only pick one? David?
Video. Okay. Again, like Rachel says, it really depends on the founder. It really does. Like, I suppose it depends on the founder. It depends on nature of the business, proposition. You know, I remember someone saying to me probably a few years ago, I have a tech business called Fintegrate, and when we were raising cash for Fintegrate at a very early stage, someone said, look, all the investors want to know is why you, and all your customer wants to know is why now, and all your team want to know is why does it matter. And those are three pillars that he argued are true no matter what the stage of business is. And what's really interesting about that is, you know, why you, why now, why does it matter? That's kind of like your marketing. You know, when you're looking at a strategy, you need to answer those three questions. How you answer them is then, if you want to be really effective, it's kind of like up to you as a human being. Like for me, it would be video. I want, because I'm good in front of a camera, I want to talk, and that's how I communicate effectively. Whereas if your consumer is likely to be someone who is going to read about what you do and why you do it, then you have to play to the consumer, whether it's an investor or a potential customer or a potential member of staff. Probably sounds like I'm sitting on the fence, but I actually don't think there is one tool that you can use exclusively to be effective. I don't think that works. I actually think you need a strong mix, and then maybe you find what works through time, and then you hone more in on that.
Yeah, and it's probably practice and just trying different things out, isn't it? That work for you. Definitely with the investors, though, I think they get so many pitch decks thrown at them in PowerPoint that using a different medium, whatever it is going to make you at least stand out and get someone's attention a little bit longer. And I suppose that's what marketing is about at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if for example, if you look at you, Rachel, if you're going for investment for a new business and it's doing the exact same thing as you've done for a long time now, and you leverage even just a picture of Beyonce, that's a showstopper. So you don't necessarily need video to capture attention. You could use a photo of someone that you've been related to in some way, shape or form. And so I suppose it's playing to your strengths, it's playing to your story. What is that little anchor in your story that you can play on really aggressively to capture the attention of someone that you want to capture the attention of. Video works, but so too does the written word, so too does branding. Personal LinkedIn posts are so important. It forms a really critical part of a personal brand strategy and a company brand strategy, and that doesn't always need to be video or images. So I think it's just having that mix. You want to capture attention ultimately.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think it's funny, the fact that we do a lot of media training for people, for corporates, for smaller businesses. It's a real mix, but actually the thing that most people, when I'm telling my story, stop at, and it's like 25 years ago, was the fact that I was a BBC journalist. It lends all this credibility, and suddenly you've kind of gone from, okay, you do content, to, oh, okay, you were a BBC journalist, but that's got some sort of standing. Even still, even though it's so long ago in my past, it really kind of like works. And I think it's that idea of people often say to me, oh, but I feel like I've told that story a million times. But I don't think that's a bad thing. It's kind of a thread that can run through like your whole career or your whole business. And actually you might have told it a million times, but you probably haven't told it a million times to lots of different audiences. So it's always different people hearing it, but actually it gives that authenticity.
I think there's that assumption when you're the leader of a business and you tell a story once that everyone in the business, outside the business, has heard it. Yeah. And actually you've got to repeat and repeat and repeat. And for the individual who's doing it, that can become quite tiresome, and suddenly the authenticity kind of drifts out of it. Mm-hmm. So how do you guys maintain that authenticity in your story? Because I mean, David, I've heard your story a couple of times now, but you still tell it with that same passion, and I still get gripped by it. I can think of a couple of weeks ago, I was at an event and a lady stood up and she just talked about something in her past, and I was gripped by it. And I'm not going to tell the story because it'll give it away, but I couldn't tell you a single thing about the rest of our presentation, but I remember that opening conversation as well. Do you think that's a natural thing, or can you train it? Can you teach it to an individual?
You can definitely teach it 100%. Yeah, I mean, we teach it. Some people are more natural at it, I think, as you were saying at the start, than others, but you definitely can teach it. It's really interesting. We did a launch of a big offshore facility up in Blythe a couple of years ago, and we did some media training around it, and it was, the kind of sort of graduate engineer right through to, he didn't need the media training, but the chief executive of the organisation. And on the day we had ITV Tyne-Tees there, and they have a quota now where ITV where there has to be, if you're going to have a panel, there has to be a woman on the panel. Okay. So who are we going to have on the panel? We don't have anybody senior who knows this project. And I was like, well, use Sophie, because we've made you trained her, and she's the graduate, and she's really articulate, and she's really, really passionate about this project. And we had at the time we had the cabinet minister for climate, we had the chief exec of the organisation, and we had Sophie, the graduate engineer, and those were our 3 speakers. And she was by far and away the best speaker. She got the most airtime. She articulated, the project with passion so well. But she said to me afterwards, it really helped that I had the training and I practiced, and it's about preparation and about getting comfortable with, speaking to, video or a journalist or what have you. But you can 100% train it, and it's not necessarily that the most experienced person in the room is the best at it either.
So it's the most comfortable?
Often, I think.
Yeah.
And articulate, and prepared.
Prepared, yeah. Important preparation, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes back to that authenticity thing again, doesn't it? It's, I guess, if you're talking about something that you kind of passionately believe in, and you're naturally going to come across more authentic, aren't you? So do you see that across all forms? I guess video is the obvious one that makes it more authentic, but I guess written forms of marketing as well, do you think it's easy to get the authenticity across there?
I would say it's probably harder than it sounds. But again, it comes back to, like, we do a lot of writing for our clients, but it comes back to really knowing and understanding the individual, like knowing the founders, knowing the business, knowing the culture and all of that. And then you can feed that into the writing as well. Because, I think it's very obvious, and I think Rachel will probably agree, when something isn't authentic in the written word. Especially if you know someone and you might see them, post about something, you're like, that's just not them. So, it is, I think, in whatever form you choose to use, it's just so important to be authentic. And that's where it comes back to, like I said, understanding the founder's motivations, understanding who they are as a person, as opposed to maybe just like the workings of their business or something like that. And I think that's where the sort of magic, if you like, happens when it comes to marketing, is really getting that personality and the authenticity through, rather than just, whacking out some marketing without actually thinking about what it means, or what the person would actually say themselves if they were writing it, kind of thing. But
Yeah, I seen a post on LinkedIn about how easy it is now to spot the ChatGPT posts.
Exactly.
On LinkedIn. It's just cutting through the authenticity straight away, isn't it? If you can tell it's AI generated. And post it out there.
Authenticity, I think, it's such a broad term. So let's say I was to have a look at Vida Creative's website, and I don't know Ellen, and I've never heard your voice, and I don't know anything about your team, and I think that you form opinions on a brand or on a person quite quickly as a human being. And normally it's when you see a picture of someone and maybe they look friendly, or maybe they look the exact opposite, but you form an opinion. And so what happens then if you meet a person, like I know Ellen and I've heard her voice and know a bit about her story and all the rest, and I think, all right, okay, well, that's cool. Maybe I read a little bit about that on the website. But now that I've heard you tell a story about the foundation of your business and how it was formed and all the rest of it, the opinion that I would have had might have been completely incorrect. And it's really difficult to be, I think it's really difficult to be authentic. And in actual fact, we're in that dawn of AI whereby everything's still a little bit murky, I think. And, if used properly, AI can help people who are really terrible at writing to get a message across in a way that without AI they would never have done it. And so I do see a lot of posts and it's quite clear that it's been written by ChatGPT. I don't mind it, so long as the person who's writing it is making an authentic attempt at communicating something. What I don't like is when someone's been lazy. They clearly can write and they can clearly communicate a message, and that's where authenticity is called into question. I feel like you only can judge something as being authentic when you know quite a bit about a person, a place or a thing. It goes back to what message are you trying to convey, how are you conveying it, and I think that's why you need lots of different streams to your marketing in order to create a working definition of authenticity.
That's good. What would your top tip be when, I guess, that authenticity goes, or the messaging feels a bit messy or stuck and you're kind of lost in that a little bit?
I think go back, like stop and remind yourself why you're doing it, what are you trying to achieve, because it can be very easy just to carry on in the day to day and just crack on with whatever strategy you started out with. But actually your business might have evolved over the last 6 months and you might be doing something completely different, but your marketing might not be actually telling that if you don't revisit. So, and often I think if things start to feel stale, that is because you're a bit like, well, this isn't really me anymore. This isn't really meaning something to me anymore. So I think it's just about taking a break, going back to, okay, strategically, what are we trying to achieve here? Why am I doing this? How can I make this feel better for me and the business, or whatever it is you're trying to do? And just going from there. And I think just taking that step back is definitely good sometimes, rather than just cracking on just for the sake of it.
Almost like a bit of a reset, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends as well, like how your business is set up, but certainly in our business, on our company channels, everybody kind of has a bit of a voice. So it's not one person who runs those channels, but we're very values based. So, you know, our values are really embedded within the business and everybody knows what they are. So it's kind of like, if you've almost like, it's when you're thinking about what you're going to post and, you know, is it true to the business? I feel like in our team anyway, that everybody's got a firm grasp on the values. So if it's within the realms of the values, then it's probably right for the business, and have a bit of freedom. And actually the judgment is pretty good, I'd say, within the team in terms of what is a post or, you know, a piece of content that would work for us and what isn't, and how to frame that within the values of the business as well. So I think that's one way to kind of look at how you frame it, because I think if you just have one person sometimes and they've got quite stringent guidelines and there's not any flex in there, I think it can get a little bit stale sometimes.
Yeah, we always say that, like, don't just let it be the founders driving your marketing. Like, talk to everybody in your business. Going back to sales, we work with one company who's got a very big sales team, and we work very closely with the sales team because they're the ones always talking to the customers. They hear the pain points, they hear the things that customers love about the products they're sort of selling. So it's just talking to everybody in your team about what they do, why they do it, what the customers are saying. And then that often brings loads of new ideas as well all the time, because there's, you know, business is fast paced often, isn't it? And things come up all of the time. So just ask other team members and get other people involved in your marketing planning, because it'll make you look at things in a bit of a different way.
Yeah, we have a standing item on our agenda every Monday about what we're going to communicate, and then I've got other clients where we'll have we'll do the planning element with the kind of like the MD and the marketing lead, but then we have a marketing champions like sort of side meeting, which are other people from within the business, to your point, Ellen, and we'll gather content from them as well, like once a month. So it's kind of operating at both levels. And then you've got that feedback loop, like, okay, just double checking, does this fit with, you know, the direction of travel? But generally, if the culture's right, the people kind of who are helping with that are pretty much on the money.
Just to add to this, like, and to answer the question specific to a smaller business, maybe one that doesn't yet have a big sales team or a big team at all, the best bit of advice I would give to a business owner is that nobody cares. Like, no one's actually thinking about us as much as we would like to think that they are. Like, they aren't. If I asked anyone here, can you remember that LinkedIn post I put on last November? You know, no one, I don't know what I've put on LinkedIn last November. I can't remember what I put on LinkedIn 3 weeks ago. I genuinely can't. Like, and if it didn't hit home, it quite literally doesn't matter. A bit like, you know, did you say you've got your A-list celebrities and then your D-list celebrities?
Yeah.
So let's, maybe in the Northeast, you've got some A-list business celebrities, people that, like, if they get it wrong, like, you know, they're probably in trouble, right? For all of 10 minutes, you're going to forgive them and forget, and you go home and you have your toast and spaghetti hoops and you forget what everyone else said. Do you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, if someone like me posts something and maybe there's a couple of people that take precedence to it, everyone's going to forget about that. Like, you need to give yourself permission to mess up. Yeah. Ultimately, nobody's paying that much attention until they are. That's when you know that you've hit the sweet spot. Until then, I think you've got the freedom to make mistakes. And, like, so if you're going off brand and you're maybe doing something that you know you're going to regret, like, just give yourself a break. Like, marketing should be about testing the water. Certainly at an early stage, I don't think any of us are being thought about that much to put handcuffs on ourselves and not allow ourselves to make mistakes.
I think that was one of the things when we started this business, that we were just one of many accounting firms on day one, and why we were different. And myself and Dave were like, well, let's just be ourselves. And we started wearing jeans for networking. And I've told this story a few times, but we just did it because we didn't want to wear a suit. You know, we'd come from an environment where you had to wear a suit, and we didn't want to wear a suit. And we spoke to a few clients, you know, that we did have, and we only had a few, and said, are you bothered about us wearing a suit? And we're like, I'd rather you didn't. It's a bit off-putting. I feel like I'm going to court when I come to see you. You know, it's kind of like, it's that kind of relationship. So we started wearing jeans in like 2009 to go networking. Suddenly we were the accountants that wore jeans. You know, you're that guy who wears the jeans, and suddenly you'd start building a bit of rapport and conversation around it, and then it's that, like, you know, trust, and off we went. And we just, you know, maybe we would have went back to suits if that hadn't happened, but we didn't. And
you tried it, and then you found out they worked. So yeah,
exactly. And you know, 17, 18 years later, the whole team, you know, if you hadn't wear a suit, they'd probably resign on the spot. Yeah. And then, you know, other interesting things like our website. We've got a picture of your dog on there.
Oh, Roscoe.
Yeah, and that gets more conversations going than anything else on the website. It's like, what's the dog all about? You know, and it's that little hook and that little story. Then off they go, they realise that we're probably normal human beings, probably.
Yeah, when I think of you guys, I don't actually think of accountants. You know that? Like, I don't. On Sunday after the Man United Newcastle game, I'm a Man United fan, and I got a picture on my phone from him celebrating. Like, you know, there's something about you guys that are really likeable, you know, and that's why you're liked, you know, and you're trusted. But I think it's personality ultimately that people buy into. You know, I know that, Ellen, you've worked with the guys for a long time. Like, there's something that makes you want to work with a business like Blue Sky, and it's definitely, it's not what you. Actually, probably is the fact that you know, my previous accountant was always suited and booted, and it was always about upholding professional standards. I do like the fact that it doesn't feel like you're in a stuffy environment when you're with someone at Blue Sky. So it's interesting that, you know, I think it's how you make someone feel ultimately that forms an opinion of you.
That saying's still right though as well, isn't it? Like, people buy from people, so that you've got to kind of get in your foot through the door with the brand, but then it is about the relationship and the personality and everything after 100%. That, isn't it? So
I always say that, going back to what you were asking earlier about the team telling their own stories and things, I always say that to my team. There are, at the end of the day, yes, we might think that we're unique or whatever, but there are so many other marketing companies out there. Why on earth would someone choose us? And it ultimately does come down to the people in the company, because they could probably get what they get with us somewhere else, but it's about the experience that we offer and the relationships that we have. So yeah, that's like so important, isn't it?
And I think that's why your story's important though, isn't it? Because if you're in that first stage where you're trying to kind of like do that deal with somebody, you're right, we work with a lot of professional services, and, you know, with the best will in the world, a marketing agency, and accountancy firm, you know, we're all offering really similar services. But actually, do you have a story that differentiates you and sticks in somebody's kind of mind? And then once they're through the door, and, you know, yes, you're professional and you're friendly and you feel like good people to work with, and kind of like a done deal after that. But it's like, how do you differentiate in that really busy marketplace? And I think we often say, oh, what's our USP? It was quite hard to find often, you know. What is it, you know?
That balance of like vulnerability and credibility, I think, is probably easier now than it's ever been. And there was that, you know, I'll put my suit on, you must be a professional. I've worked for so many people who've put a suit on, and you know, they're hiding. It's like it's a disguise sort of thing. And I think that's, if you can be vulnerable and credible, then you're going to max out, really.
Yeah, we've got this saying within our business about kind of like, how do we make people's life easier? And I just feel like that is important to me, because I think modern life for everybody, doesn't matter who you are, is like hectic and crazy and quite stressy at times. So actually, when you've got an agency or an accountancy firm or whoever, if they're actually making your life easier and doing a lot of the legwork for you, and not causing you additional stress, you're probably in a good place. So I will always remind my team about, remember that as your job, actually, to make people's lives a bit easier, because the world's hard sometimes.
Yeah. And I don't know, with a founder, these are all great tips, aren't they? You know, on day one, you sort of just so head into, right, I need to get cash in the bank, I need to grow the business, I need to do this, I need to do that. And you've almost got to take that step out and think, what have we done this week? What have we done this month? What have we done this year? And, you know, what's our story? And then celebrate it, I think.
It's celebrate, and also, like, we're talking about authenticity here, right? So I'll put my own head on the chopping block, but I'll lie in bed at night worrying about cash flow, worrying about clients dropping off, worrying about all the things that could happen legitimately to any business. And as you know, I'm running 3 businesses in 3 different sectors, and I have the same concerns across the board. So there's a deep-rooted fear in me that for whatever reason, every now and again makes me worry about failure, complete failure, and I start to catastrophize. Never once have I put that on a video. Never once have I put that on LinkedIn. I'll say the same thing as you. You should be vulnerable, you know, because that makes you credible in some respects. And yet, the worries that I've just communicated there, I'm convinced are the same worries that we all have.
100%, yeah.
And so if I wanted to gain some traction and cast the net quite wide and say, well, I'm not speaking about video, although I could use video to communicate those concerns. I'm not trying to attract sales here. I'm just maybe trying to broaden the network, create a bit of attention towards me, so that if they maybe interact with that LinkedIn post, tomorrow's LinkedIn post, which is about video and video services, maybe they'll see that too. I don't actually do that. What I preach as being quite a potent sales tool, I don't do that. And that then questions my authenticity, because, you know, I think that would be really valuable for me to say, look, here as a small business owner, these are the worries I have. Like, how do I stop worrying about this? Even though things are really good just now, you know, how do I stop catastrophizing? And I don't. Instead, what I do is I post all the stuff that I want, that I think might be kind of like easy on the eye, or people go, oh yeah, he looks like he knows what he's talking about. It calls into question authenticity. So I think we've never lived in a time where we can use the same marketing message through video, through blogs, through articles, through, in PR and LinkedIn posts, your social media, etc. All the same stuff communicated differently. But if we're talking about vulnerability, I'm not sure that I put my head on the chopping block enough and demonstrate those values, even though I've
going back to, if you're not comfortable with that, then why you shouldn't have to push yourself to do that. So yeah, it's going back to, like, if you're not comfortable with that, do something you are comfortable with. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Talking about the stuff I'm good at and not the stuff I'm terrified of.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, can you think of, I don't know, is there a moment that, can you remember when, I don't know, your personal brand, you were talking about, you know, the BBC journalist, and is that your personal brand, or, you know, is there other bits to it?
Yeah, I feel like that's a part of it, but then, you know, that it's like all of us, there's other parts of it. So for a big part of my life, you know, sport's a massive part of my life, and for a big part of my life, triathlon was a huge part of my life. So, you know, I trained a lot. I did Ironman over in Copenhagen and for the European Championships, and I was really proud of that, and it was a big part of me, and that kind of. For quite a lot of kind of like endurance type cycling things, and I've posted about those, and that seems to have kind of got, I don't know, interest people perhaps. And, you know, I guess sport and business sometimes, it's that mindset, I think, kind of like go hand in hand sometimes. So I think that's become part of my story as well. And then I guess the other part of my story has been around kind of why I set the business up, which was basically so that I could, my husband's a farmer. So he is just not around for 3 months of the year. He's literally on his tractor all day, every day. And I found that really hard to have a job, and full-time job, quite a involved job. And then what do I do for this 3 months over summer, 3-4 months? So my whole thing was, actually, I want to set up an agency that gives more work-life balance to people. So, you know, we work 4-day working week, 33-hour working week. Doesn't matter if you've got kids or you don't have kids, you know, you get the same kind of flexible working pattern as if you did. And actually that has really, I've got like real red lines around, you know, I still go and pick my kids up from school 4 days a week when they're out, because it's important to me. And if I lose that, and I get all encompassed by work, which it's a really hard ongoing battle not to do that. But then I'm kind of like, well, why did I even start this in the first place? So I feel like that's a massive part of my story as well, about how you balance kind of like whatever your personal circumstances are with your business or your job or your work. And I wanted to try and create a place that, you know, spoke to that for the people who work with me. So that's another big bit of my story.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And how inspirational is that for a new business owner as well, you know, hearing it. And I think a lot of the times we'll go to conferences and suddenly you'll see, you know, an entrepreneur on there who's, you know, taking over the world. Gymshark guy, he was there, and it's like, wow. But actually what you get is more around the bar and the conference itself, talking to other people who are in the same boat and telling the same stories. And I suppose that's your roles, isn't it? It's kind of how do you bring that out of individuals and get them to share it and people to hear it and latch onto it and be inspired by it, either to buy off them or to do something themselves. Yeah. All right. Steve, how's your questions going?
Yeah, I think we're just about there, to be honest. I guess to kind of wrap up, is the one story or journey or anything like that that's really changed the game from your side of things, or what you've been doing or anything like that?
To pick one. I think kind of similarly to what Rachel was just saying there about creating a company that I guess you would want to work for. We've done a lot of work around that, like within our company this year. So we've introduced a 9-day fortnight. So as I mentioned, when I started the business, I was literally traveling around Europe. So I know full well that it's possible to work abroad, especially now. So we've got like a nomad working policy where people can work abroad for a certain number of weeks a year. We're very flexible with our hours, all of that sort of thing. And I think it's been really nice that over the years of building the business, that's been something that we've really wanted to make happen eventually when the company was in a position to do so. And I think, I don't know if it counts as a story, but that is something that I'm really proud of in my company this year, is that we've been able to make a lot of the stuff that we've really wanted to do come to fruition in terms of our culture and allowing our people to work flexibly in certain ways around their work, you know, have a better work-life balance and things like that. So for me, I think that's really, and everyone's obviously absolutely loving the 9-day fortnight and things like that. So yeah, it's just been something really nice for us this year to sort of consolidate all of those things that we've been thinking about over the last 5-6 years since we started hiring a team. So yeah, I think that's a big shift that we've had this year that's been nice.
Yeah, I feel like I need to mention I encountered Laura doing her washing one Friday. So that was quite good.
She said, I was hanging my washing out and Steve gave me a call. I was like, I'm sure he very much enjoyed hearing that you're washing out. But yeah. That's the type of relationship that our team have with our clients.
I started sending loads of washing gifts to her for it. So.
Yeah, she did say that a few of the other Blue Sky team members mentioned that she'd been hanging out washing up. Yeah. Yeah.
David, is there one story stands out for you? Or?
So, right, I'll try and make this really, really quick. But it's a really, really personal story. So, I was when I lived in Glasgow, So I met a Geordie lass and never went home. That was my story, and we're married now. But I was married before in Glasgow. I was married for 9 years, and my ex-partner and I were the best of friends, but we should never have got married. We married young, and I was desperate for a family. I was desperate to be a dad. It was the one thing that drove me. I wanted that more than anything. And the problem with that was that my ex didn't want that, and so we were on very different paths, and yet we stayed together for a long time. And eventually we did the sensible thing, and I found myself back living with my mum and dad. And sometime later, I was here in the northeast with my construction business, and I was training someone up, and I met Victoria, and Victoria had 3 kids, and my mum had said to me, she says, if you ever go on to meet someone else, which you will, you might find that they already have a family. Because I was early 30s at the time, you know, and you're at that age where the likelihood is that might be the case. And so I tell this story a lot because it's really critically important to me. I was an employed director of a really successful construction business at the time. I was very much on that linear career trajectory, and I wanted to be a dad. And then I was one, but in a totally different way to the way that you expect to become one. I became a stepdad before I became a biological dad. Victoria and I had a little girl almost 7 years ago called Eleanor. So when I tell people I have 4 kids, you get all sorts of reactions like, bloody hell, how do you manage that and all the rest of it? And in the back of my mind, there's that story that actually is much more interesting and infinitely more beautiful and powerful than what might have been. And so the reason I mention it is that what that taught me, because eventually I realised, well, what did that take in order for 3 very young kids to accept me into their lives, in order for Victoria and her ex, the kid's dad, Paul, who I got on brilliantly with, also an accountant, not my accountant, that'd be awkward. But you know, in order for them to accept this new guy in their life, right? And the energy it took me to move from Glasgow to this part of the northeast that I didn't know from Adam, and to become a stepdad. And it was the thing that gave me permission to start my own business. It was at that point I realised, actually, all these uncomfortable feelings and thoughts, they often turn out not to be uncomfortable at all. And so the reason I mention it is we all speak about our families in one way, shape or form. That's really important to us. That tends to be what anchors us. My story's a bit more complex, but it's the one story that's most important, because it was the moment where I realised, actually, I can do something that's really uncomfortable, really testing, and achieve highly. And I think that's the makings of an entrepreneur. So that's a story that I'll tell again and again. It's an important one.
It's a good one. Thanks for sharing.
I made it all up. I didn't. We'll edit that out.
ChatGPT.
Exactly. ChatGPT.
I think for me, there's probably not like one defining thing. I think it probably builds on what you're saying there, is that actually you maybe start out in your career and you've got a plan about how you think it's all going to go. It never goes the way that you think it's going to go. And it can be for whatever reason. It can be for family, it can be for health, it can be for a whole variety of reasons. And I think it took me a while to kind of like realise that and realise like it was okay. I actually didn't start my business till I was 40, and I kind of regret not having the confidence and the courage to do it beforehand. But actually, do you know what? It wasn't the right time for me, because at the time I felt like my kids were too young and I couldn't commit what I needed to. So I think for me it's about, you know, it's meandering, and that's what makes life interesting. And you know, you tell the bits of your story that you want to tell, don't tell the bits that you don't, but also kind of like don't sweat the small stuff either, because as you say, no one's really paying that much attention anyway. So just kind of like go with it, because it is a bit of a journey and an adventure. And I know that's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, because it is just don't regret not doing it at the end of your journey. I think don't regret not doing anything that you wanted to do with your life. So yeah, I
think that sums up this conversation and story really well. It's, you know, tell the best bits, the worst bits, and you know, you never know what's going to come from them either. So thank you so much. That went really quickly, as these always do. And yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. And that's a wrap.